Today I have a very quick and easy cookie recipe that I'm excited to share. These are cornflake cookies. There are quite a few different variations of this recipe out on, the internet and other places. I think the most famous one is Christine Toasi's milk bar version. This is not meant to specifically emulate that recipe. This is just a version that has some similarities, but it's not meant to be a copycat. It's meant to be a really fun cookie, and I think you're going to love it. So with my Rice Krispie treat cookies, one of the biggest complaints I get is that the cookies or the cereal in the cookies lose their crispness. So when I did a cornflake cookie, I didn't want the cereal to get too soft or too soggy, at least not right away. It's gonna happen after a couple days anyway, but let's put that off as long as we can. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to just toast the cornflakes, which is going to dry them up a little bit, and it'll keep them crispier longer than they would be if you didn't toast them. Get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it is preheated, we're going to take 2 cups of cornflakes, scatter them over our baking sheet. We just want a nice even layer, and we're going to pop it in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to want to check the cornflakes after 5 minutes, turn them a little bit, and then just keep an eye on them because they can go from toasted to burnt really fast. If they're burnt, you're gonna toss them and start over. So while the cornflakes are cooking, you can go ahead and jump right into making the dough. You're going to start with 1 cup or 226 grams of softened unsalted butter. Next, we need sugar, of course. I have 1 cup or 200 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar, and we'll also be using a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. That's 100 grams for that. I do recommend either using an electric mixer or a stand mixer for this recipe. Anytime you're creaming butter, that's going to be a lot easier than doing it by hand. Today, I'm just going to be using my hand mixer. Let's go ahead and cream these together. Okay, so after a couple minutes of mixing, we have butter and sugar mixture, creamy, well combined, nice and uniform looking. I did opt for a softened butter instead of a melted butter because melted butter was more likely to kind of saturate the cornflakes and make them a little bit softer. Again, we're aiming for crisp, so this helps with that, and there's no chilling needed. So our next ingredients we're going to add, let me make a little space here, is 1 large egg. This should be room temperature. Drop that in our mixing bowl. And we're also going to do 1 egg yolk. So you can save that egg white for, I don't know, make some candied pecans with it, or save it to go towards some macarons, but don't want it in our cookie dough. My dogs love it when I make a recipe that leaves out a white. We will also add our vanilla extract here. You need 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract. This is when things start to be smelling really good around here. This is my homemade vanilla. I do share a bunch of videos on how to make it, or on YouTube, probably just 1 video, but I have a bunch on Instagram. Let's go ahead and mix everything together again. And before we move on to our dry ingredients, it's a great idea to just pause, scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl, because it is important to have everything nice and uniform, especially if you're using a stand mixer. The stand mixer bowl usually has like that divot around the center, and ingredients like to get stuck there. Okay, this looks good. New mixing bowl, and we're going to add 2 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour into the bowl. It's 350 grams. And I do always measure everything with grams. All of my recipes are tested with grams because that's the best way to be consistent. Get yourself a little kitchen scale. This is like 10 or 12 bucks. I'll link to it in the description, and it's going to make your baked goods so much better and more consistent. All right, next we're going to add a tablespoon of cornstarch and a teaspoon of baking soda. I don't use baking powder in this recipe, found it was better without, and a teaspoon of table salt. Teaspoons and tablespoons I don't use a scale for. They're such small amounts that using a scale can actually skew things one way or another, but for cups, always use a scale. All right, let's go ahead and whisk these ingredients together. Your dry ingredients, you want to get those leavening agents well distributed, the salt well distributed, otherwise you could have, like funky pockets that don't bake evenly in your cookie, or, salty pockets, things like that. So let's give it a good whisk. Back to our butter mixture. We are going to add the dry ingredients gradually. I usually do this in 3 parts. I just use my electric mixer on low speed to get everything nicely combined. 2 and number 3. Once again, we're scraping the bowl because there could be pockets of ingredients not getting well distributed, and we don't want that. See that? I don't know if you can see that. Well, Casey can't see it on her camera, but this is dry pockets of flour. No good. All right, once it's nicely combined, we are going to add our cornflakes. You find these. You don't want them to still be warm. If they're still warm, let them cool before you go any further. Otherwise, you could end up making your batter too warm, make it spread too much. And try to gracefully add these. Parchment paper makes it a lot easier. And I don't know if I said this in the beginning, but toasting the cornflakes doesn't just, make them take a little bit longer to get soft in the cookie. It also adds like a nice, I'm gonna say almost like a malty flavor. It adds a nice toastedness to the cookie that I really enjoy. Get this all in there. Marshmallows are next, mini marshmallows. This is 1½ cups or 85 grams. These add such a nice contrast to the cornflakes. You've got your soft and chewy, you've got your crispy crunchy. I don't use the mixer for this part, mixing everything together, because I don't want to really break up the cornflakes like too much. I want to be a little more gentle, so I use my spatula. And it's kind of a pain because the dough can feel a little bit stiff, but it's worth it. You'll break up some cornflakes. The goal isn't to not break them up at all, it's just to not pulverize them. Not that I would ever condone eating cookie dough because, you know, raw eggs and raw flour, but like hypothetically, this might be the best tasting cookie dough in the world. All right, once this is all mixed up, you can go ahead and bake. I recommend lining your baking sheets with parchment paper. This is just the sheet I use to toast the cornflakes. Why not reuse it? I scoop the cookies into about 2 tablespoon-sized scoops. Weighing these is a little bit tricky because, you know, an extra marshmallow in the dough can throw off your results. It's usually about 40 grams. I do like to roll the cookies, and this is going to make them look a little bit more uniform, but it also gives me the opportunity that if any marshmallows are like sticking out, I can kind of arrange it so they're either like right on top, or I can kind of cover them up, because any exposed marshmallow is going to kind of like bleed out of the cookie and make it look a little bit messy. Doesn't affect the taste, not a problem, but just something to be aware of. And space your cookies at least 2 inches apart. Usually do 6 to a tray. They are a messier cookie. They're delicious. Then we'll take these over to our 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. Bake them in the center rack for like 9 to 11 minutes. They should be turning a very, very light golden brown on the edges when they're done baking. If they look a little underdone in the centers, that's usually fine. So long as the edges are cooked, they will finish cooking as they cool on the baking sheet. I let them cool completely here. Now, like I said, these cookies often look a little bit messy. They're still delicious no matter what. But if you want them to look even more uniform, get yourself like one of these. It's like a large cookie cutter. I'll link to this as well. And you can just round the cookies or use a spoon. You've probably seen me use a pair of spoons in my other videos, but this does work really well for these cookies because you can kind of like scoot in any spilled marshmallow, just go in a circle. Now, some recipes, I don't recommend doing this because you could actually damage the structural integrity of the cookie, but for this one, it works fine. Totally an extra step, not necessary, but like I think you gotta admit they look better after you do it. Once the cookies have cooled on the baking sheet, you're ready to dig in. These are a really fun favorite of mine. Once you get to like the second day, the cornflakes are going to soften some, like they will soften as time goes on. But since we've toasted them, you're going to get a better flavor and the crispness will last longer than they would otherwise in such an easy step. So I really recommend it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you try this one, let me know what you think because I really do always love hearing from you. Oh, best part of the day. It's a really good cookie. You'll notice I don't use, shoot. I guess we have our bloopers for today. Now we have to wait for the dog to stop howling upstairs. Halloween dog.
Nice. Recording.
Sorry, I wasn't ready. I shouldn't have done that. I'm gonna hate myself.